questions from the audience. Then we'll let the Alliance folks speak for 15 minutes. 15 minutes of questions to them. And then the remaining time we'll open up just to questions from everybody, right? But we're trying to balance the questions so that there's enough time for both groups to talk. As probably, I hope everyone knows, there's been a couple of different presentations already on this. The village did two presentations, one on the financial side, one on some options to consider for St. Paul's. That is all posted on the village website. I encourage everyone to go read all the information that's there. There's a lot of information there to take advantage of. There was also a session on Sunday, the community church on demolition. Some of you may have been there. They presented some of their thinking around what that might look like, what the cost of that might be, etc. So that was the third presentation. And we, as the POAs, thought this was another opportunity to let groups who haven't spoken yet in front of residents have the chance to speak. So we are not supplementing anything that's been done, but as I said, giving other groups the opportunity to really talk to you as residents of the village and provide information that you may or may not be aware of. So that's really what tonight is about. Talk, listen, share, see what you think, get your questions out there, and go from there. The only other ground rule I didn't say, but I will say, because I know this has been a challenge at other meetings on this topic, the Q&A period is not about someone making a long statement about what they think. Right? The Q&A period is just to get information and hear other information that might not be available. Okay, so we really would prefer that you don't spend 5 minutes on your dissertation about what you think of St. Paul's, because people are here to hear from these guys and learn from them because they've done a lot of work on this. All right, so we're going to try to manage that as well. Okay, so first I'm going to have Bob Wolf, who some of you may or may not know. He's a resident, obviously a long-term resident of the village. He's done a lot of work in terms of, he has a lot of background in financial analysis and finance. He's done a lot of work on the financial side of things and has a perspective that he wants to share with everybody. You can introduce yourself. Yeah, you're on.
Basically, I somewhat changed my agenda because last time I spoke to you, you wanted me to focus on demolition, and I said that would take about 5 minutes. But so I would expand on a couple of different topics, some of which have been covered before, but I think a lot of people in the audience, that first time they're here, I'm very going to start at the beginning.
Louder, please.
Is the microphone working?
I live on Fairmount Boulevard, just off Boulevard Road. I'm not a member of FABPC, and I am not an active member of my PLA, but I do pay my dues. My background basically is accounting in the garment business. I've never worked in the retail sector. I've prepared many business plans with various types of companies, everything from dress companies.
Turn the microphones on louder.
Can't hear him back here.
You're fast and too loud.
Not loud enough.
Not loud enough. You tune me up. Hello? Hello?
Better?
Hello? Okay? And if I speak too fast, just give me that slow down, okay? All right. All right? Okay, let's continue. I prepared many business plans, and you learn a lot as you're exposed to different kinds of businesses. I've never been in the finance business per se. I've never done a bond issue before. I have prepared business plans for various types of people. And I did a business plan for the owner of the hair salon in Bergdorf's. I decided to become a hairdresser. Didn't realize it took $200,000 being a hairdresser. My construction experience is absolutely zero. My bonding experience is absolutely zero. Judy, you want me to continue or can I keep going with my lack of experience?
Feel free.
Basically, one of the problems we've gone through every year in this town is communication. I post a lot of things on Facebook, and you see general misunderstanding. People have no clue what is going on. I had a neighbor say to me one day, "Bob, what is the St. Paul?" So communication has always been a problem. And I was thinking back to about the late 90s. We had in Garden City a phone system Anybody remember the Philips phone system that we had? We were a quiet community for a community phone system. Anybody remember it?
I do.
It was almost like we had a private network. It was a network. We had a network in Garden City. Like the Philips that donated the phones. I don't remember how long it lasted, but we had great communication there. I'm not here to convince you of anything. It's your decision to make. I've just seen the ballot, and the fact sheet is not yet available. I don't understand what good a ballot is without knowing what you're voting for. I'm here to inform, not to advertise. The first thing I want to just give you some background of the village finances. We can afford safe roads, okay? We can afford it. Is it a burden? Probably not. Now, but people who come from town don't realize you're paying 3 taxes. The Garden City taxes represent about 35% of it. You raise about $57 million in revenues, of which about 15% is spent for capital improvements and bonding. The other 85% is spent for operating expenses. To give you a simple number, a common house assessed at $12,000 on the assessment roll, taxes would be $6,100. A 1% increase would cost them over $61. Now, for the past 2 years, the finance people, the budget committee, have decided not to raise taxes. I disagree with that more than once. And if they raise taxes, we have an additional $2.3 million in the treasury that we can spend on safe roads. So instead of doing raising taxes, they use some reserves that could have been left available to use on safe roads. As far as bonds, we're currently at about $28 million in bond debt. Highest it's ever been. At about $15 million this year, we got to $37 million. And then when St. Paul's comes, it will be what it is. But again, it's manageable. I'm not trying to put a feeling here. It's manageable. Now I will go on to demolition. Demolition has a story. It started at the first meeting that was held by Westerman, I think in this building. We got an estimate of demolition of $32.7 million. So right now, our current estimate is going to be about, I think, $13 million. What happened to the $33 million? We took out a $15 million park. I have no idea who asked for it. I think I have an idea, but I'm not going to worry about it. And it also included about $5 million in salvaging. Salvage is not required. The fact that we're in a historical registry does not mean to get any special hand. It is a building that can be knocked down. We don't have to save anything inside. It's purely optional. So it appears to me, based on what I know, I think the current board's going to ask for $13 million for demolition. I want to go take that one step on salvage. I don't know if you remember some of the meetings, the man in a fringe jacket spoke up. I did some research on him, and I think I found out that there's a lot of money to be made in salvage. He actually owns a store in Manhattan called Demolition Depot. He's in the demolition. He's in the business of salvage. I don't know his business model, but I know he's anxious to get anything old he can to put into his store. I don't know if he bought salvaging right, or he comes in and looks around. I have no idea how that business works. There is value, and some people's going to somebody else's treasure. There's money to be made in salvage. Getting at the environment issues on demolition, the typical ones, asbestos and lead. Asbestos for basement, we deal with professionals here, we're not dealing with amateurs. They know all about it, they know how to handle it. Any asbestos will be removed in a contained condition before demolition begins. Building and air testing will do it in the condition. As far as lead is concerned, if it's found, it will be removed prior to the time of demolition. The work area will be totally contained in plastic, and to contain the dust, the dust will be handled by treatment with water. If there's lead on the interior, on the exterior, the ground area will be covered with plastic, and anybody who lives within 20 feet of the building should keep their windows. Demolition also calls to demolish the entire cottages that are timetable beginning to end 26 weeks. The second thing I'm discussing is adaptive reuse. And, you know, at first I didn't understand it. It was ridiculous. But you know what? It's a possibility. My only concern is we have a problem in this town indicating construction projects. I can name the wall at the National Boulevard Station. I can mention the Western Firehouse. The plywood windows begin to run right in the Western Firehouse. It's been talked about for at least 3 years. It's been in the budget a couple times. And as far as I know, nothing is being done. My other issue is how the village goes about projecting costs. At the meeting, the last meeting, we were given a cost of about $49 million. That is, I asked, at the meeting, the first thing they talked about, oh, we changed our mind. We're not going to use plywood windows, we're going to put in real windows. That costs, let's say $3 million to put. But they know you're already used up your contingency factor. And it's not $3 million. You have to add on the 13%, you have to add on 13% to the, you have to add on 11% insurance and profit, overhead profit. So it's no longer $3 million. And basically, I have credibility issues of costing message. The other thing that I forgot to think about, is somebody has to plan this. All we have now is a basic concept plan for Westwood. Nobody has gone through it, design drawings, blueprints. So I found that this would also cost an additional 10 to 15%. That's about $5 million. It was never mentioned by Westwood. It was never mentioned by any other committee. It was a cost estimate. Was it a mistake or was it deliberate oversight? I'm not answering that question. It's not inexpensive. It was never discussed. If I could not ask that question at the last meeting, it still wouldn't be inexpensive. Let's be careful of what we read in this belief.
We borrow 5 minutes, and it's a little tricky to understand you back here. People are a little garbled, so
5 more minutes?
5 more minutes, yeah.
I think the whole process is well done. Taxes. It doesn't have to be.
Okay, now we lost you completely.
Hello. Oh.
Nobody understood a word.
I have no.
So, Bob,
Oh?
why do you have these stories not prepared?
No. No.
When you started to talk about the
That.
St. Paul's, the direction,
That's right. Okay.
just from the
Okay. I'm gonna start with the adaptive reuse. And I did find out that reuse, in this country we don't use it hyphenated, but in England it's one word. The construction cost, the original estimate was $49 million. At the last meeting I learned that they were going to replace the plywood windows by putting in real windows at a cost of an additional $3 million. And it's not really $3 million, it's $3 million plus an additional 11% insurance costs and paying the general contractors overhead and costs. So now we just added about $3.3 million. And then I asked another question. I said, do we have a design plan that we can go ahead and draw out a request for proposal to get an architect in here? Total design plan, blueprints, the whole set. Oh, that's not in here. That could be another 10 to 15%. Let's add $5 million more to the project. But the minute I saw it at $49 million, it's now up to $59 million. This is one occurrence that's going to happen every step of the way in this project. Garden City has never brought in a project under budget. I'll give you the case of the roof at St. Paul's. One was damaged by water. The original proposal to fix it was $321,000. We had to do another $150,000 added on to finish the job. I don't have a lot of faith in Garden City delivering the finished product. and I don't have a lot of faith in the numbers, but just the estimators. As far as the percent increase, I have tried 77 different ways to compute one, and I can't compute one. It's basically the fact that the need for money goes up doesn't mean your taxes have to go up proportionally. If there's some money in a reserve account, in government accounting, you can shift money around. Again, that's something that the budget committee has to look at when they determine how much of the shortfall will be covered by the budget, additional money coming in. It's all one pie. Thank you very much. And my closing comment was, thanks again. I'm glad I spoke to you. I'm not here to advertise. I have no colored pictures or postcards to hand out tonight. Thank you very much.
So we'll take a few questions, and I am going to say right now, my suggestion is whatever we spend on St. Paul's, we should add like $100,000 for good audio system. Thank you. So we'll take a few questions if anyone has any questions of Bob, and then as I said, we'll have the folks from the Alliance speak. So I'm going to say you could stand and ask your question, but let's try to be really loud because I don't want to have people come up unless you want to come up and use the mic. But let's have our first question. Bob?
Well, how are you doing? I'd like to ask you a question if you know anything about this statement.
I'll repeat the question, so go ahead.
In the Western report,
Yes.
okay? They state that the cost of adaptive reuse can be prohibited, and that the building would need to be fully restored before adaptive reuse work begins. Do you have any idea how much that's going to cost?
I have no idea what the concept is.
So do people hear the question? Let me ask that first. Yeah, okay, so Bob was referring to the Westerman report, and in the Westerman report it said the cost of adaptive reuse would be prohibitive.
Right.
And his question was, do we have any idea of what that cost would be?
No. The idea is that the building would need to be fully restored before adaptive use begins.
So the building
So
would...
we got to restore the whole building.
Okay, Bob, okay, we got it. So
Except I don't know what that's going to cost.
the question was that they then said that the building would need to be fully restored before adaptive reuse can occur, and do we know what that cost might be? Thank you.
My answer is no to both questions. I do not know, and I'm not familiar with the concept.
Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have whoever has a question come up and answer. So I don't have to... Well, who has a question? Come on.
I just have one. Right now,
I think you have to come up. I know everyone hates it, but it's all right. Be brave. Be brave. Be brave. Do it.
my first question has to do with they increased the reserve for the project by 10%. That's standard. What they also said is they increased for cost of living, cost of increases by 3%. So, in what world today is 3% appropriate?
I agree. It's a Western number, not my number.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to hear, and I'll introduce the Alliance presenters in a second, then Bob will have you back up later once we kind of get through the next round, and then we'll take one question. Great, thank you so much. Okay, great. So we're going to set up some slides, so you can be patient with us on that. And again, my $100,000 for the AV equipment would be well spent. So we're going to do that for a second. But what I'd like to do is, first of all, introduce now the speakers from the Alliance. So Frank McDonough will be, I think, leading the conversation for us. And let me give you a little bit of background around Frank. Frank has been involved in leadership roles concerning the fate of the St. Paul's campus and main buildings since the village purchased the property in 1992. During those 30 years, Frank was the chair of the initial St. Paul's committee created by the Board of Trustees in the mid-1990s. He also helped to create the Committee to Save St. Paul's, as well as help designate the St. Paul's campus as a parkland. More recently, Frank served on the 2021 Mayor's St. Paul's Committee, focusing on resident requests for activities at the St. Paul's campus. Frank's currently co-chair of the St. Paul's Conservancy, an IRS-recognized 501c3 charitable organization which provides philanthropic support for the St. Paul's campus. Frank's professional expertise is in design, finance, constructing, and operating large-scale infrastructure projects. Frank is the Goldman Sachs lead professional responsible for a variety of public-private infrastructure projects around our country and internationally. Frank is currently providing environmental infrastructure on many projects throughout Suffolk County to assure clean water and sustainable environmental impacts in the county. Frank is an honors graduate of Georgetown University and his extended family spent part of the city of Renovation, and his 2 children were educated by our fabulous school system. And does everyone like the way I'm just really ignoring everything that's going on behind here? Which is what you have. There you go. We'll get the slides up.
While they're getting that, let me address the last question about the cost associated with the renovation of the whole building. Westerman, in fact, does give you the answer to that. Westerman says between 39 and 49 million to get 2 things. Number 1, 100% of the building, exterior and interior, 100% are brought up to code and available for use. Number 2, 33,000 square feet will be available for multi-purpose uses. That's phase 1. After phase 1, what happens? Nothing. Nothing happens after phase 1 unless the village and the residents ask for it. So in answer to your question, is there no answer? The boogeyman is not here yet. It isn't Halloween. In the Westerman report, it's very specific. 39, 49 million gives you the secure exterior, secured interior, everything up to code, and the building is available for what would be called tenant improvements. That would cost roughly $25 to $30 million. And then the additional 10 or 15 was used to put up approximately 33,000 square feet of usable multi-purpose space. When you hear that there's only 15,000, or when you hear that there's only 3 rooms, you could call them 3 rooms, but they're all about 10,000 or so square feet. 33,000 square feet means approximately 10 decent-sized homes in the village of Garden City. That's what you're getting for 39 million to 49 million, okay? So the answer to the question is right there in the book. So I'm sorry you missed that. Let me talk to you for a moment about the adaptive reuse of St. Paul. This is a community center. We spent over 18 months asking for different uses. We have all those uses and they're all permitted under the parkland. We asked the village if we could do an opinion poll and if we could do a survey. They did not give us the money for that, so we researched everything over the last 30 years and came up with a list of all the permitted projects. When the village agrees, we hope, to do an adaptive reuse, we will have our own design team come in and look at the uses that the residents would prefer. So it is available for multi-purpose uses for seniors, for teens, for STEM, for any other kinds of educational uses, academic and athletic, okay? So it's a 24/7 type of community purpose building. It's affordable. We'll go through the numbers for you, but if you want the exact numbers, at 39 million to 49 million, your debt service on that, and I'm going to get technical here, so if you need me to go back again, I'm happy to. But your debt service on that is between 2.3 and 2.9 million. 2.3, 2.9. That's the total amount of principal and interest you would have to pay. Well, it's just like your total amount for the mortgage. If you divide that by the number of residential taxpayers in the village, there are 8,200 taxpayers in the village, commercial, residential, and industrial. We took an average and decided that based on our understanding and discussion with the village, about 7,000 would be residential. And if you divide that on an average to 2.3 and 2.9, it comes out between $330 and approximately $410 per household per year. It doesn't change, right? So depending on how much you want to spend, between 39 and 49 million, you can get as low as, on average, approximately $330 per house, or as much as $410 per house, okay? That's your capital cost. We've heard, oh my God, you didn't include cost, issuance costs and also engineering, legal, etc. We did not. That's accurate. Why did we not? Because the other two scenarios, demolition and facadism, had not fully defined themselves. And so they did not have an ability to define what their soft costs would be. And so that's why it was agreed by the Mayor's Committee and the board at that time not to include soft costs. That being said, when you look at those numbers, if you were to do and include soft costs for adaptive reuse, it would be less than the 10 to 15% that they are talking about. Why is that? Adaptive reuse is not building a building. It exists. Look at the cover of the paper. Has for 30 years. Adaptive reuse is an interior process. And that interior does not require the kind of architectural and engineering design that facadism would require. Facadism, with all of the engineering requirements to hold up the building, would have a significant engineering and architectural cost, probably in excess of 15%. That does not apply to the interior. How many of you own homes here in New York City? And how many of you have done restoration or renovation, right? So you know that if you were to put up a brand new family room and build something outside, that has one cost. But if you only renovate the interior of that room that you may have, that has another cost. The difference between adaptive reuse and facadism is that difference. Adaptive reuse is taking the building that you have and renovating the interior of it. And as I said, between 39 and 49 million, or on an average household basis, between $330 and $410, you can get that building renovated totally on the exterior in the new roof, and totally on the interior up to code. And then for 33,000 square feet, you have usable rooms that you can use for all the uses we described: seniors, teens, STEM, etc. Okay. Look, when we developed our finance plan, we went out to all of our members. The St. Paul's Alliance now comprises over 1,100 individuals. And those individuals have expertise in engineering, architecture, construction, etc. And when we went through those 1,100, we were able to determine that our cost and our plan had actually 3 significant advantages that the village does not have. What are they? Number one, it can be done more quickly. What that means is you are not susceptible to inflation. How much more quickly? 2 years, maybe 3. Why? The building exists. Number 2, we can do it much more efficiently. Why? Because we have suggested here that the best way for this project to be developed is to use the St. Paul's Conservancy, a 20-year 501c3 that is approved by the Internal Revenue Service. What advantages does that give you? The first advantage is that it allows you to collect philanthropic contributions. When we did that about 10 years ago, the philanthropic contributions from the village itself came close to $5 million. Are we suggesting that's available today? No, but it's a good starting point to think about. Number 2, in addition to that group, the St. Paul's Alumni Association, exclusively working with the St. Paul's Alliance, is also willing to contribute a very substantial amount, so long as the building is preserved. That could come up to as much as 10% of the cost of doing this project. A major advantage. Philanthropic. Number 3. Inflation was number 1, philanthropic was number 2. Number 3, procurement. The process of doing a project in the village is hampered or controlled or restricted by the state of New York. you must do a competitive bidding project. A competitive bidding project means you go out for different skills, architectural, engineering, etc., and you bid each package. With the St. Paul's Conservancy, we are not so limited. We do not have to do a competitive bidding project. We could do a design build. What is that? It's a much more efficient and a much more inexpensive project. In fact, it's far more attractive in this case because, as I said, we're only doing the interior of the building, right? We're not doing anything significant on the exterior. We're not building a new building. So you can move ahead quickly on this, and that's where you save on inflation, and that's where you save on time. How much does design build versus competitive bid save? Approximately 20 to 40%. How do we know that? Well, let me give you just one example. Years ago, when they built the Mario Cuomo Bridge, which all of us still call the Tappan Zee Bridge, right? The governor got bids of approximately $5 billion to build it under the competitive bidding process. He knew that was too expensive on tolls, he renegotiated with it, and then he got a special act of the legislature to do a design build. What was the new cost? $3 billion. It was so attractive that the city of New York then requested several of their projects be similarly allowed to do design build. In general, design build is not permitted to villages, counties, towns, etc. In this case, using the St. Paul's Conservancy, the 501c3, you get these advantages again. Quicker time, less inflation, philanthropic support, and design build. Okay? What else can it do? Because it is not subject to the state law, we do not have to do a prevailing wage agreement. It can be a project labor agreement, which also saves you money. So, those are 4 good reasons. And the 5th good reason is, when you look at our cost of $2.3 to $2.9 million of debt service, and you compare that to the most available and comparable project the village came up with, which was a sale-leaseback. Ours is not a sale-leaseback. They were at about 3.5. We have much more ability to structure the type of a bond that gives you a lower interest rate. So let's go over those advantages of having this project developed by the St. Paul's Conservancy.
All right, so 5 minutes.
1 is time and inflation. 2 is in terms of procurement. 3 is in terms of bond structure. 4 in terms of prevailing wage. All of those things mean you get a bigger bang for the buck. Okay? And that's why you would want to do that. Next. Okay, that's it. Okay. No, we're done. So, let me give you something more in terms of assessed value, okay? Because assessed value is a very important part. We don't have Irene Moore to help us with this, so this I'm not going to tell you is a precise amount. But we had a way of calculating this. That when Irene Wu did the calculation for a sale-leaseback, not the structure, but a sale-leaseback, she said the average median home in the village of Garden City was worth around $800,000. It came out to a assessed value of approximately $9,760. And that translated into an annual cost of, for the $800,000 home, of approximately $210 to $200 per year. What does that mean for you? If you double that, that will tell you if you have a 1.6 house, what that would be. 210 then becomes 420. 220 becomes 440. If you triple it, your home value is 2.4 million, it would be approximately 660, etc. So on an assessed value basis, when you look at the cost here, again, thinking if you can spend between $39 and $49 million, those are the costs that you would be looking at here. Would there be operating and maintenance costs? Yes, it would. Would they be on prevailing wage? No, they would not. But these are the type of costs that you have to be thinking about. And why is all that important? Because if you spend this money, it's an investment. The value of Garden City real estate, because of the Garden City pool of phased project development over 50 years is significantly higher than it would be without it. Just go to Rockville Center and see how their home values increased when they did the then called Skellis Park. What we're suggesting here is a phased development over many decades that starts with 39, no more than 49 million, can increase your home values between 3 and 8% based on the research of most real estate academics that have looked at this project. What does that mean? For the $800,000 house, by spending between $200 and $240 each year for 30 years, you then have a home that's value has gone up between approximately $24,000 and $64,000. That's what you're doing. You're investing in your future, you're investing in your children, and you're investing in your home. That's the nature of St. Paul's Alliance. That's the 1,100 people who are supporting this. These are your neighbors, and what we're looking for is a fair comparison, assessed value, and annual cost, and we're available for your questions. Thank you very much.
Is the space duplicative of what we have in the village?
Is the space duplicative of what already exists in the village? It's nice we have some new space, but does it replicate what we already have?
That's a great question. I'm going to let my compadre Brian talk about whether or not we need space. I can tell you over 18 months of talking to people, two things became apparent. The rec department doesn't think we need space, mothers don't think we need space, and senior women do think we need space. All three of them, mothers, seniors, senior women, and academics think we need more space, but I'll let Brian talk about it.
Yeah, Ryan Mulroney, I live on Hampton Road. Just a clarification, I'm not a member of the Alliance. I have worked with the Alliance to set up their finance plan. I offered myself to the demolition advocates, emailed them, said if I could be of any assistance, let me know. I wasn't contacted by them. That's fine. It's not a big deal, but I made myself available to whoever wanted assistance with the plans for St. Paul's. There's space is a very big issue right now in Garden City. People want to argue about meeting room space and fields. That's great, but let me ask you a question. When you pay property taxes, how many people only pay the village and don't pay the school? Anybody here? Or does anybody pay school tax and don't pay the village tax? You pay both taxes, correct? Okay. The 6th grade class was the largest 6th grade class in the history of Garden City school system. They had to reconfigure lunch because they didn't have enough space for the lunch program. They have kids standing during lunch and standing on the bus. That's how big that grade is. The demos beneath them, 2, 3, 4-year-old kids, is bigger than that 6th grade class. Universal pre-K. I talked to the administrator, the superintendent and the Board of Ed. They believe within 5 years, universal pre-K will be mandated by the state of New York. The teachers union is the most powerful union in the state, if not the country, and those jobs are key for the teachers union. 5 years, you're going to have to offer universal pre-K. Before you knock down 125,000 square feet, I would ask you this. Where are they going to put universal pre-K? I'm not suggesting they put it in St. Paul's. I know there's an alienation. But what I'm saying is, sure, you can knock down St. Paul's for $15 million, but in 3 to 5 years, you're going to have to build a school on the east side and a school on the west side to accommodate universal pre-K. To me, that's $40 to $60 million in bond issuance. At least. In 5 years, it might be $80 million. That's only a guess, but I would say at least. I'll give it back to you. I'm not saying to put a school in St. Paul's because legally there's a big issue there. But can we rearrange the space in this village, the square footage of this village, to accommodate everything that we need? Can we put performing arts in here? and use that performing arts space already in this existing facility to the school system, and use that to accommodate increased class sizes in universal pre-K. I talked to the superintendent, she thinks that they could. There are a few other ideas we talked about that would make sense. So I would really, really think, before you knock a building down and lose 125,000 square feet, when you've never had a bigger need for square footage over the next 10 years, I suggested to the mayor that they meet with the Board of Education and say, what are our long-term capital needs and projects over the next 20 years? Because if one entity is knocking a building down, the other entity is building 2 new buildings, that's a lot of bond issuance. Over $100 million in bond issuance just to get back what we're knocking down.
I think that's great that, we need school space, but we can't use St. Paul's for schools. We are going to issue, and I'll use the Westerman numbers because those are the official numbers, $60 million in construction and soft costs. Interest, if you can get a 30-year bond, is $54 million over the life, and total interest and principal is $114 million. Operations and maintenance were estimated at $1 to $2 million a year. Over 30 years, that's $30 to $60 million. Total, $144 to $174 million. You can't use St. Paul's for schools. I just said it. I asked Mr. McDonough a year ago the question that I started off with, which was, is this duplicative space? After a bit of hemming and hawing, the answer was a reluctant yeah. So this is space we don't need. It's nice.
Okay, so let's have a question.
Okay, well, okay.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
And look. The issue is we have a changing demographic in this village. We know that. Just the children alone will tell you. Number 2, when you asked the senior women if they could use more space, they said yes. Everyone who came in from the rec department said we needed more space. Is it duplicative? I'm not going to pick it. Let him have his moment and claim it is. But let's talk to the issue. Let's talk to the issue.
That's what he told me.
Okay, everybody.
Let us talk to the issue of the numbers he gave you.
Yep.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. When you buy your home at $800,000 and you pay a 4% mortgage and you add that up over 30 years, is that going to be a big number? Of course it is. But that's what you're doing. The important number is what you have to pay each year or each month. All right? And now we have shown you that the cost for that, if you want it, is between $330 and $410 on an average house. And if you have an $800,000 home, it's $210 to $220 of assessed value. Those are real numbers. And so you can look at the boogeyman, or you look at what you can afford and say, is that worth the investment that I have? Okay.
I'm going to take someone else. Yes, we are. Thank you. You can ask a follow-up.
You want to have a debate
No.
and get information out. This is not information. This is misinformation.
Okay, could you have a seat?
This is misinformation.
Could you have a seat?
Okay, let's continue with the bullshit.
Okay, thanks. Bob? This will be fun.
I have a question and a statement.
Just a question.
Just a question, okay. My question is, and I'll build it into the question.
You're cheating.
Have you looked at the additional costs once you build whatever you're going to build? And the reason that I say that is because what you're projecting for everyone here is $200 to $300 and $400 a year. Now again, I'm going to use your example. Your example was, you own homes. We've all done construction. Anybody here own an older home? Because I will tell you, when you start an older home, the old joke is once you turn around and move one pipe, it's like dominoes. So we're talking about a building that's 140 years old. Second of all, your example was that when we redo this, it's going to basically be, think about it, the size of 10 homes. Anybody heat their house? So before we start anything, now you're going to have to heat a building of that size. Think about that. Multiply that by 10. By the way, you can't only heat the 33,000 square feet. You got to heat the whole building. Third thing that
Okay,
you
Bob,
have
your question
is
is
that
what?
the third thing, and the last thing I'll say is, what about the employees? I used to be a trustee for 8 years. Just to add 10 employees. That's about $130,000 per employee times 10 is $1.3 million. Add all of that. So my question is, when you project this to the residents, and I'm not saying right or wrong, what are your numbers when you look at that?
Great question. Thank you, Bob. Always intelligent, always thoughtful. Let's get to the heart of it. What we talked about is what the capital costs were. That's what we were all asked to talk about. In terms of O&M, I'll let Ryan talk to O&M because he worked on it. But in terms of capital costs, the reason it was limited to that capital cost was so you could decide what was better between demolition or facadism or adaptive reuse. And each of them have a different operating and maintenance factor with them. No question about it. What we said was on adaptive reuse, you had a lower additional cost of issuance and soft costs. That's just true. In terms of operating and maintenance, I believe I'll let Ryan address that, but Westerman also had some estimates in there as well. Ryan, where'd you go? Operating and maintenance.
At the last fluid hall meeting, you did state that the numbers that were on that sheet did not include operating and maintenance costs, which is extremely important, right? When you go to demo, your operating and maintenance costs are close to zero. You're basically maintaining a, grass, trees, benches, not much different than what you have already. Facadism, we never got a plan from the facade advocates, so it's very hard to tell what that would be. We thought that would be the most significant because the first idea was a sports, arts, and theater complex. And the size of it was pretty big, but we never heard from the facade advocates about their program. The adaptive reuse it will be a significant amount of money. I think we said between $1.5 to $2 million a year, for the maintenance and operating. We did talk to the recreational department, and I believe they said they would require 5 additional employees. Most of the programs that are run through the recreational department are run through outside contractors, and most of the programming pays for itself in that sense that it pays for those outside contractors. They're not village employees, but they said they would need 5 more employees. I believe it was 5 or 6. I think it was 5 more employees. We have developed 3 different plans to pay for that operating maintenance cost. One, of course, would be to issue as part of the tax allocation on the homeowner, so along with the debt service, the principal and interest, we would pay the operating maintenance cost. We did come up with 2 other ideas of how to pay that operating and maintenance cost, and once the St. Paul's Alliance decides which one they want to settle on, they can present that, but it has been considered, but I would stress that the numbers that you're seeing do not include it.
So if you just do a quick calculation, and again, Bob, good question. The $1.5 million is a fair number. Remember, if you do the St. Paul's Conservancy, you do not have to hire municipal employees with their significant benefits, okay? That's the important part. That's the saving. But if you did at $1.5 million, that means you have a $210 a year O&M cost. And for that, there are other things that Ryan said. There are programmatic things that generally pay for that. And also, if we would do the pool, you would have an annual membership fee. Okay?
Go ahead.
I have a simple question. When you did the calculation on the carrying costs for this, what was the interest rate that you projected?
So
So it's currently 8%.
the question was when they did
When you want to get a mortgage on a house today, it's 8%.
when they did the calculation on the carrying cost, what was the interest rate you used?
So we went to one of the top financial institutions in the country, if not the world, and they have advised us that the interest rate there would be approximately 4.5%, depending on. That's a tax-exempt interest rate. It's not a taxable rate. So the advantage of the conservancy. Yes, it is. Every university, every hospital, all of those are tax exempt. So that's the advantage of it, you see. So it's a good question. But you get the advantage again of having quicker time, more flexible debt structure. You could, for example, if it became a very important issue, you could say, I'm not going to pay principal for 10 years and just pay interest. If you only paid interest under the $39 million scenarios, that means your annual payment for capital would be approximately $1.6 million, which would translate into, I think, around $200 on average household. I don't know what the assessed value of that would be, but that again would be a way it would be more flexible. Well, of course, that means you push the principal back out a little bit farther. But over 30 years, what generally happens in hospitals and universities, they refinance that and continue to push it out so that your cost on an annual basis stays relatively attractive, and that's why you do it in phases. But again, you don't have to build anything more. You can stay at 39, 49 million forever. Okay? But that's how it
Just so if you want the real-time numbers, for a AAA municipal bond, the 30-year rate closed today was 440. Okay, and the 10-year was 350, and the 5-year was about 350. That's for a AAA municipal bond in the day today.
Another question, Steve?
You mentioned a couple of things about the usable space. I think you said 33,000 square feet. Like, what would that space be on day one? And secondly, you said that it's basically doing adaptive reuse as an interior renovation. But I'm sure the outside of the building needs a lot of work, from pointing and brickwork and that. So can you discuss some of the exterior work that would be involved and the costs involved in that?
First, ADA, yes, ADA compliant. Has to be. Okay. Number two, great question. The cost to do the exterior, including the roof, okay, as inspected by Westerman, as stated by Westerman, would be somewhere between, say, $24 and $30 million. What does that mean? That means all the bricks are repointed, everything on the interior that is not a bearing wall, which means the walls that hold up the building, those are called bearing walls. Everything interior is taken out. Everything on the interior. Did anybody go by the Lord & Taylor building while it was under construction? Do you ever look in there and just see what it looked like? It would look like a vast cavern and everything was exposed. That's what would happen in most of the building, except for the 33,000 square feet that's in the central core, basement where there'd be a kitchen, first floor where there would be a cafeteria eating area, third floor where there's second floor where there's a chapel, and third floor where there's a very significant boardroom. All those in really the south-facing facade would be usable space. Am I going to tell you what exactly that usable space is? No, that's up to what the residents want at that time. And that's where the Conservancy would operate. What the Conservancy would do would be totally resident-run. You would have various standing committees that would be finance, legal, construction, engineering, programmatic, academic, scientific, etc. If you had an interest in that, you would join that program. The chair of each of those subcommittees would then be on the executive board, which would make the determinations as to how and what space to use. You could, for example, say, we don't want to put 33,000 square feet in the middle, you might want to put it on the side. You could. But those are the things that the residents would decide. And why do you want that? Because the residents have a deeper expertise than your board, and they're not turning over every 2 years. So most of the areas around the country that have this problem with infrastructure do it because they're on a 2 or 4 year election cycle, which is very difficult. This Conservancy would stay a longer period and allow continuity to happen. Okay. Yes, sir.
Another question. That 33,000 square square feet that you talk about, is that all on the first floor?
No, no, it's on 3 floors.
But I understand that the small rooms with dormitories,
Yeah.
that many of those partitions are weight-bearing.
The answer is some are weight-bearing in the hallways. Okay, but
So you couldn't make a Lord and Taylor kind of open space?
no, I referred to the room, what the room looked like in Lord and Taylor. I wasn't saying you could do that in Lord and Taylor space. I was saying if you looked at the inside of the building for Lord and Taylor, where you just saw the rough walls and the pipes and the electrical, that was my illusion. But on that, you know, we could ask Will Elise, who is an architect, what the interior would look like. But generally, you actually have a lot more open space than you would know. So that these could be fairly large size meeting rooms, etc.
Liz, take it.
I think I'm loud.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the comparative analysis?
Comparative analysis?
Yes, okay. So, Frank, can you explain the difference between, or why the demolition number, total number is lower than the community center, than concept one, the community center?
And I apologize and tell you I can't hear you.
Come up here, okay, fine.
I believe it.
Sure. I'm referring to this one pager that has the 4 concepts on it. So, I got it. So the total cost under concept 1 is $49,385 annual cost, 27 to 30 units. Demolition is $32 million, which is less than 49. The annual taxpayer cost is higher, and the project length is longer. Can you explain that?
Okay, so let's talk in terms of the difference here. The 385 had a different, was at a different time, a different interest rate, but it's still within the 330 to 410 that we talked about. Right? All right, so that's the same. The 49 million actually is reduced to somewhere between 39 and 49 according to Western. The estimated project length is 27 to 38 months. Why is that? Because there's a shorter procurement process that I talked about, and there's a shorter environmental process that we talked about, very significant. So now let's go over to demolition. On demolition, 472, let's talk about that first. When you demolish a building, the state of New York requires you to pay for that demolition over 10 years. That's called the New York Public Finance Law. That's called the period of probable usefulness. Because the state, as are many states, know that some governments are not very disciplined. Garden City is very disciplined. And so the ability to pay off your debt early is required. So when you have to pay your mortgage off in 10 years, not 30, you have to pay more principal up front. So in this case, the numbers we had at the time were approximately 18 to 20 rough. I mean, George Salem the other day, I think, quoted what he thought the number was around 17 to 20. If you just had $20 million of principal, let's do that since it's very easy math. $20 million of principal at 4% would be $800,000 a year of interest, okay? So, but you have to pay that $20 million off in 10 years. So that means you have $2 million every year for 10 years, right? 2 times 10 is $20 million if you figure. Plus 800,000. Now that 800,000 declines if you pay off your principal, but the average in there is probably around $450,000 to $500,000 per year. So that means every year for demolition you would be paying approximately $2.5 million for that cost. Remember, that's in comparison to where we said the adaptive reuse was, which was $2.3 million to $2.9 million. There you got a building, here you got dirt. Now, the other aspect of that is, what would you put after that? How many were here in the 70s when we had a pit by the Garden City Hotel for 10 years. This mayor, to her everlasting credit, said she would never allow that to happen, and so did the guys at SABGC, to their everlasting credit. So we were asked early on, what would the cost of a upgrade to the dirt pit? I mean, you could buy a $20 bag of grass seed at Target, throw it around and say that's all you need, but that's not Garden City. We have one of the top landscape architects in the country here, Bill Cool. Let me let him tell you what the range of options are for that, and that's where your number came from.
Okay, can you just answer why is the project late?
Why the project late? Sure. When we talked to every expert, and we talked to 4 or 5 on demolition, they told us 2 things. The actual demolition would probably take 6 months or so, depending on any number of different factors. But before you could get to demolition, you had to go through an environmental impact statement. You had to hire the engineers to do that, so that was a procurement process. They felt, and they've said so as recently as last week, I think Mr. Mooney from Colin Dyke said the process would take at least 24 months before you would have your environmental impact statement, called it draft EIS, draft environmental impact statement. What everyone has said is that you must add on the litigation costs and the litigation time to that, which would be at least 2 to 4 years, depending on how vigorous the litigation was and how the review went. What does that mean? 2 years of prep to do the EIS? Let's just say 2 years or more to do the litigation. You're now at 4 years. Multiply that by inflation at 3 to 4%. That adds to your cost. And then what happens? So sometime in 2029,
Excuse me, you're supposed to be moderating this
you
meeting.
now have a chance to
you're
pay
moderating
for the
the business.
demolition,
You're moderating
and you
the
have to vote on a general obligation bond. That general obligation bond could be defeated. So after 2 years or 3 years of legal work and 2 years of litigation, you now have a vote, and people voted down. What do you have? The same thing. So that's where we got those ones from.
Okay, so could I just ask one
You
follow-up
finish up,
question?
and Frank, this answer is like 30 seconds or less.
Where can we find
Go.
the underlying details for each of these? Like what you just described, you know,
Westerman report.
the Western follow.
Well, remember, Westerman actually gave you 5 reports.
Okay, it's in the Western report. So what we're going to do now, as we said, was open it up. So I don't remember. Is he back there? So we're going to open it up for both presenters to answer questions.
Yes, where did you get the information? The village has provided us with a lot of information. You need to go to the village website, or actually you can go to the Gateway websites, and they have easily downloaded the cost estimates from us.
Look in the mic.
Use the microphone.
Can't hear him.
Yes,
Mike.
My question is, Frank, will you promise to honor the vote and not prolong us with needless litigation disputing the demolition? I'm asking Frank if he will promise to not prolong the misery of St. Paul's with needless litigation after the residents vote overwhelmingly for demolition.
Are you kidding? Come on. Let's have a serious question. One person, we have 1,100 individuals who are supporting the St. Paul's flag, who have an enormous number of younger families in this community. Let me ask other question.
So Frank, I want to be clear because that is a fair question.
I am one vote, and I will vote my conscience at the time, and that's what I'm going to do. I sat here and I watched them take down the Garden City Hotel, and I swore to myself
All right, no speeches.
I would not do that. Am I going to litigate? I don't know what the group will do because I am part of the St. Paul's Conservancy. can tell you the philanthropic organization is not going to be voting for demolition.
Okay, so that was the answer. So let's take questions from those who haven't spoken yet. Yes.
The numbers for demolition have always been about $17 million. George will support that. The mayor reduced that to $13 million by taking out what's called salvage value, the cost of removing the valuable aspects of that. Those numbers have not changed. What has changed is, what would you put in its place? Again, George Salem, a proponent of demolition, said he does not want to just throw grass seed on top. That number, and you can ask Bill Cool, the landscape architect, what the range of costs would be, and that could be an additional 5 to 15 million, depending on what you wanted to put there. That's how those numbers were generated. The issue of salvage is more complex depending on how the demolition aspect is handled by preservationists in the state, and they could, as part of a settlement of any litigation, require you to save the significant amount of architectural woodwork, could save the stonework on the exterior, could save the ironwork on the interior, could be, yes.
So we have village people that would work against us, doing litigation.
Say again?
Possibly, there could be people from the village bringing litigation to the village because they're not supporting demolition.
There could be people inside and outside the village who could do that, who would be creating litigation. It isn't just the village, it isn't just the village residents. It isn't just the village residents who would be in a position to raise the anti-demolition side.
George? You want to come up or you want to just speak? Frank, what did you say George said?
George, I was referring to your remarks on Sunday at the community church, where I recall you saying that the demolition number that you recall was around 17 or 18 million, subject to the salvage issue. That's what I said, right? And then you said, as I recall, that you would not be in favor of just having bare land there, that the land required something more than a bag of grass seed. Is that fair? Okay, so the two things I said were accurate and fair. Thank you.
Now, my real question here is, what are the steps to get the Alliance program approved over the other plans that are already on the table?
So the question was, what are the steps that would be necessary to get the Alliance program approved when there are two other proposals that are there?
Another great question. Also quoting you, as I remember, the ballot that we were promised by FABGC, which would be clear and convincing as opposed to the earlier ballot, I guess 2011, which had 3 options. They would give us 2 options. If you've seen the ballot, it's a very confusing ballot. And so how the board decides what to do after that, I have no idea, George. They can do whatever they want. This is an opinion poll. My understanding is the mayor, who's worked very hard on this, has said she will, depending on the outcome of the vote, then convene another group to evaluate all the options, meaning what are the permitted uses, what other things can happen, and then she will do an opinion poll. So in effect, she will replicate the work of the prior committee on which you served for a while. And so, what is the steps after that? It really depends on who the Board of Trustees will be and what they decide. It would be conjecture on me to say anything else. Okay, great question, George. As you would expect, everyone, George is a institutional investor recognized top equity analyst, not a bond analyst, an equity analyst. But in this case, what the question was, who is the issuer of the bonds? And who's the obligor? In this case, the obligor would be the St. Paul's Conservancy, a 501c3, and it would not involve the village's AAA credit or be an obligation on the village. The 501c3, George, is like anything else. Its members, as I said to you earlier tonight, would be resident villages, okay? Residents of the village. And so the obligation would be paid as a result of the contract between the village and the St. Paul's Conservancy.
Steve?
Good evening. Steve Garay. Mr. McDonough, I apologize. I think I agree with you about something. As far as I think you accurately stated, the cost of demolition, the reason why there's a reduction now from the 17.6 to the 12.8, and I think the problem is that when Westerman did his calculations about what salvage could be, we don't know where he got that particular number from, why he picked some things as opposed to others. Moreover, you're supposed to do net salvage if you're really doing it. In other words, if you're salvaging things, what are you going to do with the salvage materials? And Westerman did not provide any information about what you would do with things that were salvaged. Would that reduce the cost of demolition? Maybe, maybe not. Would some of the things that you were salvaging be utilized in another structure if you would demolish the building? Those are open questions. So I agree with your analysis in terms of numbers and why they changed. So could the number be 17.6 as opposed to 12.8 at the end of the day? Possible. Could it be more than that, less than that? We don't know.
I'm going to follow up for people who haven't asked a question. Take a follow-up question.
Did anybody look at salvage, just following up on this, anything that's salvage from the building, okay, the storage costs, because you're going to have to pay for storage. Now, if you're talking about the windows, you get into all the ways that you have to be in control of their environment and all that, and that's going to be a new cost until you find a buyer to buy the salvage.
So did we look into storage costs for salvage?
If you go based on the original report, there was $5 million for storage where they would pack it up, they would actually take it apart, they would label it, they would pack it, and I think ship it down to Arizona or someplace. It was $5 million just for the storage, just to take it apart.
Is that that's just
That's right.
per year?
What was included? Okay, hold on. What was included in that was it was for 5 years. That was the estimated cost of packing it up, putting it down, storing it for, I believe, 5 years. I'm not sure. I just remember that because it's been a little while. And, oh, absolutely, that's for sure.
Right, so the question was if we if the building were demolished, what consideration was given to hazardous waste, things in the air, different pollutants, long-term effects, etc., and was that considered, and what was the consideration?
Good question. The three predominant issues were asbestos, lead paint, and particulate matter. Westerman will tell you what the rules of the New York Department of Environmental Conservation and the EPA are, and they claim that if you dampen the demolition as it goes forward, those are not problems. Facadism and adaptive reuse will have issues with asbestos because it might have been a small amount of asbestos around the pipes when they were eventually insulated. When the building was built, there was no asbestos was ever used in building materials, so it's not a big asbestos problem. Is there a lead paint problem? Yes. And so there has to be a certain amount of vacuuming and how you encapsulate that. There are a number of different strategies for that. The particular issue is a bigger issue because that comes not only from the demolition and the work that goes on, whether it's winter or summer, or you hose it down or don't hose it down, or when the trucks go through. You may argue, and some will argue, that there are ways that it's only a 20-foot, 20-yard distance from the main building, and you can manage that with plastic. The question as a parent is whether or not you're going to have your 7 or 14-year-old running around there at that time. At the judgment, they can tell you no problem under the EPA, but as a parent, you would have to make a different judgment or agree with that judgment. Okay?
Thank you. Question, did the Alliance investigate and possibly consider any opportunities for sustainable design in the rebuild so that it can qualify for state support and the NYSERDA or CLCPA for building mechanicals?
So the question was, did the Alliance consider any sustainable types of design, energy use, etc.?
Absolutely. And more importantly, since energy use has been something I've been in since the 1980s, we've been looking at geothermal and other areas that will continue to reduce the carbon footprint, etc. Look, it's a new age. The issue of environmental impact from demo is a real question. You can come on either side of that. I won't debate that tonight. But the issue of what we have to do to reduce carbon footprint, the issue of how we want our children to be living in what kind of environment, that separates Garden City from everything else. I'm of the opinion that when you take down historic structures, you start to look more like mid-island communities like Rockville Center, etc., and have that same impact on your home values. So that if you take away what's distinctive, you draw fewer and fewer distinctive people who want to come here. And so the issue has always been from the beginning, why did you move here? What brought you to Garden City?
So the question is about sustainability.
Sustainability is a primary issue for us.
Excuse me, can you just explain what happened in Rockville Center that has destroyed their property values? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, let me help you with that, okay?
Yes.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
You're very good at helping.
I appreciate it. Thank you. What we're saying is, what makes Garden City property values different from Rockville Center? And no, I said,
Please answer my question. What happened in Rockville Center?
Rockville Center does not have the distinctive architecture or the distinctive history of Garden City. Nothing happened in Rockville Center. There are differences in property values.
To the fact that Rockville Center did something that lowered their property value.
No, I said Rockville Center increased, excuse me. I said the Dean Skellis fields on Peninsula Boulevard increased their property value. So you misheard that.
So nothing they did by destroying something increased their property value.
I did not say that anyone in Rockville Center destroyed anything. I said the Dean Skellis Park on there was something that increased their property values. Was that helpful?
Okay,
but still own the property? How is that segregated?
That's a great question. The question is, if the 501c3 is involved in this process, how does that affect the village? And the answer is, it helps the village in several respects. Number one, the village continues to own all the land, no change in title. Number two, the village owns all the structures on the land, no change in title. Number three, the village does not pledge its general obligation credit. So that preserves general obligation credit for other events, meaning your other construction projects that they could have. Those would be the major three reasons. So the 501c3 actually accelerates a lot of the value that increases property value. What would then happen? Of course, if your ad valorem value goes up, tax revenues goes up, so that helps the village as well. Thank you for that question.
I think you might be our last question. You were first, and now you're our last. Oh, wait, sorry about it. Whoever your hand, is somebody have their hand back?
It's okay.
Okay, all right. I'm going to stick to my rules. Yeah. Yes.
Question I got the sheets that you issued, and the idea of the environmental impact study and litigation apparently is only applied to demolition and facade. It's not applied to the community center or the reuse. Why? Microphone.
Every project has to undergo an environmental impact statement. So the comment that the adaptive reuse does not have an environmental impact statement is not accurate. What is accurate to say is that because the adaptive reuse does not have demolition, our advice from the attorneys who looked at that said the process of going through the environmental impact statement would be shorter. If you look at environmental impact statements, particularly in New York, which I do all the time, you'll see that there are two options. One's called a long form and one's called a short form. The short form are for things that do not have a significant change in the existing environment. The long form requires much more. In the case of adaptive reuse, the advice that we were given was that it is more likely than not that you could do a short form environmental impact statement, and therefore it would be quicker. Is that a guarantee? No. But is that the advice we received? Yes. Now, because of demolition and the air issue that generates, and the traffic issue that generates, one of the other issues, remember, is you will be taking out 125,000 square feet of stone, and that means trucks of very significant size will be driving down and through the villages in Manhasset, Port Washington, Herrick, etc., to come down into Garden City. And where do they go from that? I don't know. But will those communities have a voice in what happens? Yes. Could that be a source of litigation? Yes. Just on traffic alone. Okay? So I'm about done, but I do promise Bruce Torino that he could close for me. Bruce, would you come up for a moment?
Deciding how the spaces are going to get used and how we make money off of this. I feel in general, as a village, we joke all the time in my house that like we don't know how to make money as a village. Like the pool could cost a little bit more and be open a little bit more. We can get better use out of it for the summer or some of our facilities. But I feel like little by little things are dwindling away, like our promenade, and now this does too. These are kind of things that help sell our village and the amenities that we have. I want to see them stay, but I also want to see them really benefit and make us money? Who will be in
So
charge of that?
I couldn't hear all that. Let me just address one component, please, on the cost. If you do demolition and you do...
I don't want to demo.
I'm just
I
talking
want it to
cost.
stay.
Just talking cost. I'm just talking cost. Those are open-ended costs because of the litigation and other things. And on facadism, since they don't have a program, and because facadism has, you just don't know what's going to happen when you open walls of this entire building, could be very expensive. And adaptive reuse, because it's an interior renovation, your budget is what it is, and you do not spend more of it. If you have, like in your kitchen or your home, I've got $50,000 to spend, I'm not spending 55. That's the budget. And so you get whatever you can get for 55,000, or in this case, however much it was, 39 or 49 million, that's it. So you can be sure that that is the
Yeah, that's not my question. I want to know.
I couldn't hear you.
Sure.
Okay? Bruce Torino, I'm one of the trustees. Your question is great. I can't predict the future because my crystal ball has glaucoma. The real reason is once you embark on whatever it is that you do, if they are programs being run by the recreation department, they are the ones that you will turn to. If you don't like the programs, on the off-site chance I'm still in office, call me. What happens is you have space. You have options. What do you do with those options and that space? The cottages are not going to be there. They have to go someplace. If you look at the ballot, the Board of Trustees has options on both sides of the proposals. I cannot tell you what the board will do on October 22nd. But it is up to you, in order to have your voice heard, to continue the dialogue, to absolutely vote, and as you have put out, for all of us to hear, what do you want? Once we hear, that's a royal we, by the way, what you want, that's when it gets to be put into operation. This is, come October 22nd, this will not be over. This is but the beginning. Hopefully, the light at the end of the tunnel is not a train coming at us. So, to that extent, if there is space, then you have programs. You have the opportunity to have programs. If you have any of the other options, you may or may not have that space for whatever your programs that you're looking at. On that note, since I know that we all want to go back to our loved ones and our homes, one of the things that I heard, by the way, this is my second tour of duty as a trustee. I served from, my father was an Army colonel, told me never volunteer, I didn't listen. So from 97 to 2001, I was a trustee, and St. Paul's was debated ad nauseum. We were going to have an assisted living, we were going to do all kinds of things. It did not happen. I feel like I'm living in Groundhog's Day, but now is the opportunity for us to do something. But in 97 to 2001, and presently, what I've heard from many of the residents, particularly those that are possibly a touch older than me, if that's possible, that if you're on a fixed budget, what's going to happen? So one of the things that I asked is, how can we make this both more conducive, more affordable for those that, quite candidly, may not be able to have the wherewithal to pay for a taxation. A conservancy does not operate by the same rules as a government. Accordingly, I ask, and it will be considered, that if we go the conservancy route, that we make accommodations for others. By the way, what you're seeing here was printed off in my office by my mother. She's 96. She's Prussian. When you say you work from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, she says that's only half a day. So, who am I arguing for? Yes, it's for my mother, it's for all of us, and it's for the generation that we are protecting and holding together. Ladies and gentlemen, I very much appreciate your concern, your efforts. Judy?
So thank you, and I'd like to thank the trustees, Trustee Bittern and Trustee Harrington, who joined us tonight, so we appreciate that. Additional information about Trustee Carino's statement. I would also like to let everybody know that, contrary to what I might have liked, this has actually been recorded. So it's on justthefactsmedia.com. So if anybody wants to hear the conversation or you talk to friends who couldn't make it tonight, you can direct them there and they will be able to see it and listen to what everybody said. Don't forget to vote on October 21st. That's the most important lesson to leave. Thank you very much.
If you are a senior, I want you to know that the St. Paul Alliance is going to pursue Trustee Carino's suggestion that seniors be granted an exemption from the capital cost of the St. Paul's renovation. So just like